How did a single funny selfie turn my whole world upside down? What made my husband respond to a harmless joke with cold official divorce papers? This is how one photo destroyed everything, and why I still think I did nothing wrong. The cafe in Montmartre was perfect, exactly the kind of picturesque spot that would make everyone back home jealous. I adjusted my hair one more time and leaned closer to Mathieu, feeling the familiar flutter in my stomach that I hadn't experienced in years with Adrian. "Come on, Eudora, just one photo," Mathieu said, his French accent making even the simplest words sound romantic. For old time's sake. I should have said no. I should have thought about Sophie, about Adrian waiting at home, about the life I'd built over 8 years of marriage. Instead, I thought about how Adrian barely looked up from his laptop anymore, how he'd forgotten our anniversary last month, how he made me feel invisible in my own home. "Just a quick one," I laughed, pulling out my phone. "My friends will die when they see this." The selfie was perfect. Mathieu's arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing, the Eiffel Tower visible in the background through the cafe window. I looked happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in months. Without thinking too hard about it, I posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Reunited with my favorite Parisian. Some things never change. T'as Paris vibes, certain old friends, or certain living my best life." Within minutes, the likes and comments started pouring in. Lily, my best friend since college, was the first to respond. "OMG girl, you look amazing. Adrian better step up his game." That comment gave me an idea. Maybe Adrian needed a little wake-up call. Maybe seeing what he could lose would remind him what he had. I opened WhatsApp and sent him the same photo with a cheeky message. "Look who I ran into. Remember when you used to take me to romantic cafes? Miss you. Sort of." The message showed as delivered, then read almost immediately. I waited for his response, expecting maybe some jealousy, perhaps a reminder of how much he loved me. Instead, I got it. 2 words. That's all my husband of 8 years had to say about his wife having coffee with her ex-boyfriend in the most romantic city in the world. I stared at my phone, feeling a mix of disappointment and vindication. This was exactly what I meant. Adrian had become so emotionally distant that even obvious attempts to get his attention barely registered. Mathieu noticed my expression and reached across the table to touch my hand. "Everything okay, chérie?" "My husband," I sighed, showing him Adrian's pathetic response. "This is what I've been dealing with for months. No passion, no emotion, nothing." Mathieu shook his head sympathetically. "A beautiful woman like you deserves better. You always did." The rest of our afternoon together felt like stepping back in time to when I was 22 and the world was full of possibilities. Mathieu was exactly as I remembered. Charming, attentive, making me feel like the most interesting person in the room. When he suggested we grab dinner, I didn't hesitate. "Life is short, Eudora," he said as we walked along the Seine that evening. "You can't waste it being unhappy." By the time I got back to my hotel that night, I had 17 missed calls from Adrian. I almost called him back, but then I remembered his dismissive "got it" response. If he wanted to play games, I could play too. The flight home the next day gave me plenty of time to think. I'd been on a legitimate business trip. The company really had sent me to Paris for a marketing conference. Running into Mathieu was just a coincidence. We'd grabbed coffee and dinner as old friends. Nothing more had happened, technically speaking, though the emotional connection I'd felt was undeniable. Adrian was waiting when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop closed in front of him. Sophie was at school, so it was just the 2 of us. "How is Paris?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Good. Productive conference. The presentations on digital marketing trends were really insightful." I kept my tone light, professional. "How was Sophie while I was gone?" "She missed you. Asked why you weren't answering your phone yesterday." I felt a small pang of guilt but pushed it aside. I was networking. You know how these conferences are. Dinner meetings run late. Everyone's in different time zones for calls back home. Adrian nodded slowly. Right, networking. Something in his tone made me defensive. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I'm sure you learned a lot. That night, Adrian didn't come to bed. I found him the next morning asleep on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes. When I asked if everything was okay, he just said he'd been working late and didn't want to wake me. But I knew better. He'd seen the photo, seen the comments from my friends, and now he was sulking like a child. Part of me felt guilty, but a bigger part felt justified. If Adrian had been paying attention to me, if he'd been the husband I needed, none of this would have happened. I called Lily on my way to work, needing someone to validate my feelings. He's being ridiculous, she said immediately after I explained the situation. You had coffee with an old friend. So what? He's just jealous because you looked happy without him. That's what I think too, I agreed. I mean, it's not like anything happened. We just talked. Exactly. And even if something had happened, can you blame yourself? You've been telling me for months how neglected you feel. A woman has needs, Eudora. Lily's words made me feel better, but they also planted a seed of something dangerous. What if something had happened? Would it really be my fault? I'd tried everything to reconnect with Adrian, planning date nights he'd cancel for work, buying lingerie he'd barely notice, initiating conversations he'd respond to with grunts while staring at his phone. When Clara, Adrian's mother, called that afternoon, I expected support from her too. I saw your photo from Paris, dear, she said. You looked lovely. Thank you. It was nice to catch up with an old friend. Yes, well, Clara paused. I hope Adrian isn't giving you trouble about it. That boy has always been too serious for his own good. He's being a little cold, I admitted. I think he's jealous, but he won't just come out and say it. Men, Clara sighed. They never know how to express their feelings properly. Don't let him make you feel bad for having a social life, dear. Marriage shouldn't be a prison. Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. Even Adrian's own mother could see that he was the problem, not me. That evening, I tried to bridge the gap. I made Adrian's favorite dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and put on the dress he'd complimented me on during our last anniversary. This looks great, he said when he came downstairs, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I thought we could have a nice evening together, I said, serving him a generous portion. Talk about our days, maybe watch a movie after Sophie goes to bed. That sounds nice. But it wasn't nice. Adrian was polite but distant, answering my questions with minimal responses and asking none of his own. When I mentioned funny stories from the conference, he nodded appropriately but didn't laugh. When I tried to hold his hand across the table, he didn't pull away, but he didn't squeeze back either. After Sophie went to bed, I suggested we open another bottle of wine and talk properly. About what? Adrian asked. About us, about whatever's bothering you, about how we can fix this distance between us. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Is there something to fix, Eudora? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, you seem happy. Your trip to Paris, reconnecting with old friends, living your best life, as you put it. Maybe the distance isn't a problem for you. That's not fair, I said, feeling my temper rise. I've been trying to connect with you for months. You're the one who's always working, always distracted, always somewhere else mentally, even when you're sitting right here. You're right, Adrian said quietly. I have been distracted. I've been trying to figure out when exactly my wife stopped loving me. His words hit me like a physical blow. Adrian, It's okay, he said, standing up from the table. I think I have my answer now. He went upstairs, and I heard the guest room door close. I sat at the kitchen table finishing the wine alone, telling myself that Adrian was being dramatic and unfair. I'd done nothing wrong, nothing at all. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and unspoken accusations. Adrian moved his things into the guest room temporarily, claiming he was working on a big project and didn't want to disturb my sleep with his late hours. Sophie noticed immediately. "Why is Daddy sleeping in the other room?" she asked over breakfast, her 8-year-old eyes full of confusion. "Daddy's just really busy with work right now, sweetheart," I said, shooting Adrian a look that dared him to contradict me. Sometimes grown-ups need their own space to concentrate. Adrian said nothing, just continued reading his tablet while eating his cereal. His silence felt like an accusation, and I resented him for putting me in the position of having to lie to our daughter. At work, the atmosphere was different too. My assistant, Monica, kept giving me knowing looks, and I caught clusters of co-workers whispering that fell silent when I approached. Finally, I cornered Monica in the break room. "Okay, what's going on? Why is everyone acting weird around me?" Monica looked uncomfortable. "It's probably nothing, but some people saw your Instagram post from Paris. There's been some talk." "Talk about what?" "I had coffee with an old friend." "I know, and I told everyone that, but you know how people are. They're saying you looked pretty cozy with that guy, and that your caption was kind of flirty." I felt my face flush with anger. So now I can't have male friends? I can't enjoy myself on a business trip without people making it into something it's not? "Of course you can," Monica said quickly. "I'm just telling you what people are saying. Maybe if you posted something with Adrian, it would shut down the gossip." The suggestion irritated me even more. Why should I have to prove my marriage was solid to a bunch of nosy co-workers? Why was it my responsibility to manage other people's perceptions when I'd done nothing wrong? That evening, I tried a different approach with Adrian. Instead of being defensive, I decided to be vulnerable. "I know you're upset about the photo," I said, finding him in his makeshift office in the guest room. "And I understand why. But Adrian, we used to trust each other. We used to be able to talk about anything." He looked up from his laptop. "We did. So, talk to me now. Tell me what you're really thinking." Adrian was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Finally he said, "I'm thinking about how happy you looked in that photo. Happier than you've looked with me in months." "That's not true." "It is true, Eudora. And I'm thinking about how you sent it to me like it was some kind of joke. Like seeing my wife in another man's arms was supposed to be funny." "It wasn't like that," I protested. "Mathieu and I are just friends. We've known each other since college." "Mathieu," Adrian repeated. "You never mentioned running into Mathieu when I asked about your trip." "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. I knew you'd make it into something it wasn't." "What was it then? Explain it to me." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "It was a coincidence. I was walking to the cafe near my hotel, and there he was. We recognized each other, had coffee, caught up on old times. That's it." "And dinner?" My stomach dropped. "What?" "You had dinner too. I can see it in your credit card statement. The same restaurant, 2 meals, same time as your coffee receipt." I felt trapped, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Fine, yes, we had dinner. We were both alone in a foreign city, so we decided to continue our conversation over food. There's nothing wrong with that." "You're right," Adrian said. "There's nothing wrong with having dinner with an old friend, but there's something wrong with lying about it. I didn't lie. I just didn't think it was important enough to mention. Important enough to post on Instagram, but not important enough to tell your husband." I could feel the conversation slipping away from me, so I tried a different tactic. "Adrian, I feel like you're looking for reasons to be upset with me. Ever since I got back from Paris, you've been cold and distant. You moved into the guest room, you barely talk to me. You're making Sophie anxious with all this tension. Is this really about one photo?" "Maybe it's not about the photo at all," Adrian said quietly. "Maybe it's about what the photo represents." "Which is what?" "That you're not happy in this marriage, that you're looking for something I can't give you." The accusation stung because it was partially true, but I wasn't ready to admit that. "That's ridiculous. I love you, Adrian. I love our family. I need to feel like you love me too." When was the last time you took me somewhere romantic? When was the last time you looked at me the way Mathieu looked at me in that photo? So this is my fault. I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I'm saying we both need to try harder. Adrian closed his laptop and looked directly at me. Eudora, are you having an affair? The question hung in the air between us like a live wire. I could have told the truth, that while nothing physical had happened in Paris, I'd felt more connected to Mathieu in one afternoon than I had to Adrian in months. I could have admitted that I'd been fantasizing about what might have happened if I'd been braver, more willing to live a little, as Mathieu had suggested. Instead, I looked my husband in the eye and lied. No, Adrian, I am not having an affair. I can't believe you'd even ask me that. I'm asking because you're acting like someone who's having an affair. The secretiveness, the defensiveness, the way you're turning this around to make me the villain. I'm not being secretive. I told you everything that happened. After I found the receipts. Because I knew you'd overreact, just like you're doing now. Adrian stood up, and for a moment I thought he might walk away again. Instead, he moved closer, and I could see something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, but something colder and more final. Eudora, I want to believe you. I want to believe that my wife wouldn't betray our family for some romantic fantasy with her college boyfriend. But I need you to understand something. If you're lying to me, if there's more to this story than you're telling me, I will find out. And when I do, there won't be any more conversations like this one. His words sent a chill down my spine, but I forced myself to maintain eye contact. There's nothing to find out, Adrian. I'm telling you the truth. He nodded slowly. I hope so. That night, I called Lily again, needing reassurance that I was handling everything correctly. He's being paranoid, she said immediately. Checking your credit cards? That's controlling behavior, Eudora. You're allowed to have friends. I know, but I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. And Sophie's starting to ask questions. Kids are resilient, she'll be fine. The question is, what are you going to do about Adrian? What do you mean? I mean, how long are you going to let him punish you for having a social life? You went to Paris, you had a good time, you shared a harmless photo. If he can't handle that, maybe the problem isn't you. Lily's words echoed in my head as I got ready for bed. Maybe she was right. Maybe Adrian's reaction said more about his insecurities than my behavior. Maybe I'd been apologizing for something that didn't require an apology. The next morning, I decided to stop walking on eggshells. If Adrian wanted to sulk in the guest room, that was his choice. I had nothing to feel guilty about. But as I was getting dressed for work, I noticed Adrian in the hallway, talking quietly on his phone. When he saw me, he ended the call quickly. Who is that? I asked. Work, he said, but something in his tone made me suspicious. This early? Different time zones. It was a reasonable explanation, but it felt like a lie. As Adrian went downstairs to make breakfast, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The dynamic between us had changed, and for the first time since I'd returned from Paris, I wondered if I might be in more trouble than I'd realized. The family dinner at my parents' house was supposed to be an olive branch, a chance for everyone to see that Adrian and I were working through our little rough patch, as my mother had called it. Instead, it turned into the most humiliating evening of my life. Eudora looks wonderful, doesn't she? My mother announced as we sat down to dinner. That trip to Paris was exactly what she needed. She came back glowing. I shot her a grateful smile, but I could feel Adrian's tension radiating from across the table. Sophie was picking at her food, still confused by the strange atmosphere that had settled over our house like a fog. Paris is beautiful this time of year, Clara said diplomatically. I'm sure the conference was very educational. Oh, it wasn't all work, my father chimed in with a wink. Our girl knows how to have a good time. That photo with her friend was delightful. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek, Adrian's younger brother, looked up from his plate with interest. What photo? He asked. Just a silly selfie with an old college friend, I said quickly. Nothing exciting. It looked exciting to me, my mother continued, oblivious to the tension. Very romantic setting. Reminded me of when your father and I went to Paris for our anniversary. Mom, I said, trying to signal her to stop talking. What? I'm just saying you looked happy. Happier than you've looked in months. Derek's eyes moved between Adrian and me with growing understanding. An old friend, huh? Male or female? Does it matter? I asked, feeling defensive. I guess that depends on who you ask, Derek replied, looking directly at Adrian. Adrian hadn't said a word since we'd arrived. He was cutting his food with mechanical precision, his jaw tight, his eyes focused on his plate. I could feel the situation spiraling out of control. It was just Mathieu Lefebvre, I said, trying to sound casual. You remember Mathieu, Adrian? From my senior year at Northwestern. Now, Adrian did look up, and the expression on his face made my stomach clench. Mathieu, he repeated. Your ex-boyfriend, Mathieu. Former boyfriend, I corrected. From over a decade ago. We're friends now. Friends who have romantic dinners in Paris, Derek observed. It wasn't romantic, I snapped. God, why does everyone have to make this into something it's not? I ran into an old friend. We caught up over coffee and dinner. That's it. That's the whole story. Eudora's right, my father said firmly. People are being ridiculous about this. Adrian, you should be proud that your wife is still attractive enough to turn heads. Shows you married well. I wanted to crawl under the table. My father's attempt to help was making everything worse. Dad, please, I whispered, but he wasn't finished. When I was your age, Adrian, I would have been flattered if other men found my wife charming. Competition keeps a man sharp. Adrian finally spoke. Is that what this is? Competition? Adrian, Clara said warningly. No, I'd like to understand. Adrian continued, his voice dangerously calm. Because according to everyone here, I should be flattered that my wife is posting romantic photos with her ex-boyfriend. I should be proud that she's getting attention from other men. I should see this as motivation to be a better husband. That's not what anyone said, I protested. Isn't it? Adrian looked around the table. Because what I'm hearing is that Eudora was justified in seeking male attention in Paris because I'm not giving her enough attention at home. What I'm hearing is that her behavior is my fault. The room fell silent except for Sophie's small voice. Why is everyone fighting? I immediately went into damage control mode. We're not fighting, sweetheart. We're just having an adult discussion. It sounds like fighting, Sophie said, her eyes filling with tears. Hey, I said, moving to comfort her, but Adrian was faster. You're right, Sophie, it does sound like fighting. I'm sorry. He picked her up and held her close. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, but that doesn't mean we don't love each other. The tenderness in his voice when he spoke to Sophie, combined with the coldness he'd shown me all evening, broke something inside me. I felt tears starting to form and decided to use them. This is exactly what I mean, I said, my voice breaking. I can't do anything right anymore. I go on a business trip, I have coffee with an old friend, I share one innocent photo, and suddenly I'm the worst wife in the world. The tears came freely now, and I could see my parents' expressions softening with sympathy. Adrian, maybe you're being a little harsh, my mother said gently. I've tried so hard to make our marriage work, I continued through my tears. I've tried to be understanding about all the late nights, all the cancelled date nights, all the times you choose work over family. But the moment I have one evening of feeling appreciated and attractive, I'm the villain. Eudora, Adrian started. No, let me finish. I've felt invisible in my own marriage for months. Mathieu made me feel like a person again, like someone worth talking to. And yes, that felt good. I'm sorry if that threatens you, but I'm not sorry for enjoying myself. I was crying harder now, and I could see the effect it was having. My father looked angry on my behalf. My mother was shooting disapproving looks at Adrian. Even Clara seemed uncomfortable with her son's behavior. Only Derek looked skeptical. So, this is about emotional neglect? He asked. Derek, Clara warned. I'm just trying to understand the timeline here. When exactly did Adrian become neglectful? Before or after you started reconnecting with old boyfriends? That's enough, my father said firmly. Eudora doesn't need to justify having friends. You're right, Adrian said suddenly, standing up. She doesn't. He set Sophie down gently and looked around the table. Thank you for dinner. We should go. Adrian, sit down, Clara commanded. We need to work this out as a family. No, we don't, Adrian replied. This isn't a family problem. This is between Eudora and me. But, my mother started, Mrs. Patterson, I appreciate your concern for your daughter, but with all due respect, you don't know the whole story. Then tell us the whole story, Derek challenged. Adrian looked at him for a long moment, then shook his head. It's not my story to tell. He kissed Sophie goodbye and headed for the door. I started to follow, but he held up a hand. Stay. Enjoy your family dinner. I'll see you at home. After he left, the room erupted in supportive murmurs. My parents assured me that Adrian was being unreasonable. Clara apologized for her son's behavior. Only Derek remained quiet, watching me with those same skeptical eyes. He's just scared, my mother said, rubbing my back. Men get insecure when they realize they're not paying enough attention to their wives. He'll come around, my father added. Just give him time to cool off. But as I accepted their comfort and reassurance, I couldn't shake the image of Adrian's face when he'd looked around the table. It wasn't anger I'd seen there, or even hurt. It was disappointment. That night, when I got home, Adrian's car wasn't in the driveway. I found a note on the kitchen counter. Staying at Derek's tonight. We'll pick up Sophie for school in the morning. I crumpled the note and threw it away, then immediately retrieved it and smoothed it out. Something about the careful handwriting, the formal tone, made me nervous. As I got ready for bed alone, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Finch? This is David Morrison from Morrison & Associates. I represent your husband in some legal matters. He's asked me to schedule a family meeting for this Friday at 2 p.m. Will that work for your schedule? My blood ran cold. What kind of legal matters? I think it would be best if we discussed that in person. Can I put you down for Friday at 2? Yes. But what is this about? All will be explained on Friday, Mrs. Finch. Have a good evening. The line went dead, and I stared at my phone in shock. A lawyer? Adrian had called a lawyer. I immediately tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried Derek's number with the same result. Finally, I called Lily in a panic. He's bluffing, she said after I'd explained the situation. He's trying to scare you into admitting to something you didn't do. But what if he's serious? What if he actually wants a divorce? Then he's an idiot, and you'll be better off without him. Eudora, listen to me. You had coffee and dinner with an old friend. That's it. No court in the world would side with him over that. But what if what? What if he somehow proves you're lying? How could he do that? You're not lying, right? The question hung in the air, and I realized I couldn't answer it honestly. Not even to my best friend. Of course I'm not lying, I said finally. Then you have nothing to worry about. Show up to this meeting, tell the truth, and let Adrian make a fool of himself. But as I hung up the phone and lay alone in my empty bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the one who was about to be made a fool of. The next morning, Adrian arrived exactly at 7:30 to pick up Sophie for school. I watched from the kitchen window as she ran to his car, her backpack bouncing. He hugged her tightly before helping her into the passenger seat, and something about the scene made my chest tight with anxiety. When he brought her home that afternoon, I was waiting by the door. We need to talk, I said as Sophie ran upstairs to change clothes. Friday, Adrian replied without looking at me. We'll talk Friday. Adrian, this is ridiculous. You called a lawyer over a photo. Over a pattern, he corrected, finally meeting my eyes. Over months of feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. Over the growing certainty that my wife is lying to me about something important. I'm not lying to you. Prove it. The challenge in his voice caught me off guard. What do you mean, prove it? Show me your phone. My heart started racing. My phone? Your phone. Your messages with Mathieu, your call logs, your emails. If you're telling the truth, you have nothing to hide. I forced myself to laugh. I'm not showing you my phone, Adrian. I'm not a child, and you're not my parent. I have a right to privacy. You do, he agreed, but I also have a right to honesty from my wife. You're being paranoid. Maybe. We'll find out Friday. That evening, after Adrian left for Derek's house again, I sat in my bedroom with my phone in my hands. The messages with Mathieu were damning, not because anything explicitly sexual had happened, but because they showed a level of emotional intimacy that would be impossible to explain away. The flirting that had started during our dinner in Paris had continued over WhatsApp. Late-night conversations about our marriages, our dreams, our regrets. Mathieu telling me I deserved better, me agreeing, him suggesting I visit Paris again soon, me saying I'd love to, nothing technically inappropriate, but everything that would destroy my marriage if Adrian saw it. I started deleting the messages, one by one, but my hands were shaking. What if Adrian was right? What if he could somehow recover them? I'd heard that nothing was ever really deleted from phones. I spent the next hour Googling how to permanently delete WhatsApp messages and can deleted texts be recovered by lawyers. The search results were terrifying. Cloud backups, phone company records, forensic recovery. There were dozens of ways that deleted messages could be retrieved. By Thursday evening, I was a wreck. At work, the whispers had gotten worse. Monica had heard from someone in accounting that Adrian had been asking HR about our employee assistance program, specifically about marriage counseling and legal aid. The gossip mill was working overtime, and I could feel my professional reputation crumbling along with my personal life. Maybe you should talk to a lawyer too, Lily suggested when I called her in tears. If Adrian's playing hardball, you need to protect yourself. With what money? He's frozen our joint account. He what? I hadn't told her about that yet. I tried to use our credit card yesterday, and it was declined. When I called the bank, they said Adrian had put a freeze on all joint accounts pending a legal review. He can't do that. Apparently he can. I only have access to my individual checking account now, and there's barely enough in there to cover groceries. Eudora, this is financial abuse. You need to document this. But even as Lily raged on my behalf, I could hear doubt creeping into her voice. The situation was escalating beyond what anyone could explain away, as a misunderstanding over a photo. Thursday night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Friday's meeting, about what Adrian might have discovered, about how my life had spiraled so completely out of control. At 3 a.m, I got up and checked my phone again, rereading the few messages with Mathieu that I hadn't deleted. One in particular made my stomach churn. I can't stop thinking about what might have happened if you'd stayed another night in Paris. Some chances only come once, chérie. My response, maybe some chances come twice. I might be planning another trip sooner than expected. I deleted both messages, but it was too late. I could already imagine Adrian's lawyer reading them aloud in that conference room. Could picture the look on Clara's face when she realized what kind of woman her son had married. Friday morning arrived grey and rainy, matching my mood perfectly. Adrian came to pick up Sophie as usual, but this time he lingered after she got in the car. Eudora, he called through the window, bring whatever you think might help your case this afternoon. Phone records, emails, anything that supports your version of events. My version, I repeated. Adrian, there's only one version. The truth. I hope so, he said. For Sophie's sake, I really hope so. As they drove away, I realized this was the first time Adrian had mentioned Sophie in the context of our problems. The implication was clear. Whatever happened today would affect our daughter's future. I spent the morning trying to prepare for the meeting, but there was nothing to prepare. Either Adrian was bluffing, or he had evidence I didn't know about. Either way, I was walking into that conference room blind. At 1:45, I stood outside Morrison & Associates, staring up at the imposing glass building. Through the lobby windows, I could see Adrian already inside, talking to a man in an expensive suit. They both looked serious, professional, prepared. I took a deep breath and walked inside, telling myself that in 2 hours, this would all be over. Adrian would realize he'd been paranoid, we'd go home together, and we'd figure out how to rebuild our marriage. I had no idea that in 2 hours, I'd be staring at divorce papers with my name already typed in the defendant line. The law office was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the intimidating mahogany and leather I'd imagined, Morrison & Associates was all glass and steel, modern and cold. A receptionist with perfectly styled hair directed me to Conference Room B, where I found Adrian sitting across from a man who could only be David Morrison. "Mrs. Finch," Morrison stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Adrian didn't look at me as I sat down. He was dressed in his best suit, the navy one I'd bought him for our anniversary 2 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I have to say, I'm confused about why we're here," I began, trying to take control of the conversation. "Adrian, if you wanted marriage counseling, we could have found someone together." "This isn't marriage counseling," Morrison said gently. "This is a legal consultation regarding the dissolution of your marriage." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Dissolution? You mean divorce?" "I mean we're here to discuss the evidence Mr. Finch has gathered regarding your extramarital affair and to determine the best path forward for all parties involved." "I'm not having an affair," I said automatically, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Morrison opened a folder on the table. "Mrs. Finch, I want you to understand that everything we discuss today is confidential. Nothing you say here will be used against you if we can reach an amicable agreement. However, if this matter proceeds to court, everything in this file becomes admissible evidence." He slid a photograph across the table. It was the selfie from Paris, but this copy had been enlarged and enhanced. You could see details I hadn't noticed before, how Mathieu's hand rested on my shoulder, how I was leaning into him, how genuinely happy I looked. "This photo was posted to your Instagram account on March 15th at 4:37 p.m. Paris time," Morrison continued. "According to your phone records, you called your husband that same evening at 11:23 p.m., but the call lasted only 37 seconds. "I tried to call him," I protested. "He didn't want to talk." "According to Mr. Finch's phone records, he called you 17 times between 6 p.m. and midnight that day. All calls went to voicemail." I felt heat rising in my cheeks. I was at dinner. I couldn't answer. "Yes, dinner." Morrison pulled out another document. "Your credit card statement shows a charge of €147 at Le Petit Coq restaurant at 9:15 p.m. 2 entrees, 2 desserts, a bottle of wine. That's a long dinner for a casual catch-up with an old friend." "We had a lot to talk about." "I'm sure you did." Morrison's tone remained professionally neutral, but I could hear the judgment underneath. "Mrs. Finch, what did you and Mr. Lefebvre discuss during this dinner?" "I don't remember specifically. Old times, our careers, general catching up." "Did you discuss your marriage?" The question felt like a trap. "Maybe briefly. It's natural to talk about your life with old friends." "What specifically did you tell Mr. Lefebvre about your marriage?" I looked at Adrian, hoping for some sign of mercy, but his face was stone. I might have mentioned that we'd been going through a rough patch." "A rough patch," Morrison repeated. "Can you elaborate on that?" "Just the normal stresses of marriage. Work, raising a child, not spending enough time together." Morrison pulled out another document. "Mrs. Finch, do you have a WhatsApp account?" My blood turned to ice. "Yes." "Are you aware that WhatsApp messages are automatically backed up to cloud storage unless specifically disabled?" I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the papers in his hands. "Your phone company provided us with records showing extensive WhatsApp communication between your number and a French number registered to Mathieu Lefebvre. These communications began the evening of March 15th and continued until March 28th, yesterday. Morrison began reading from a printed transcript. March 16th, 11:43 p.m. your time. You wrote, "I can't stop thinking about our conversation tonight. You're right that I deserve to be happy." Mr. Lefebvre responded, "You do deserve happiness, chérie. Life is too short to waste on people who don't appreciate you." Each word felt like a nail in my coffin. I wanted to interrupt, to explain the context, but Morrison continued reading. March 19th, 1:15 a.m. your time, Mr. Lefebvre wrote, "I dreamed about you last night, about what might have happened if you'd been brave enough to stay." Your response, "I dream about it too. Maybe next time I will be brave enough." "That's not what it sounds like," I said desperately. "We were just talking hypothetically." March 22nd, Morrison continued relentlessly. You wrote, "Adrian suspects something. He's been cold and distant since I got back." Mr. Lefebvre, "Then perhaps it's time to stop pretending to be someone you're not." Your response, "You might be right. I'm tired of feeling guilty for wanting more from life." I could feel tears starting, but I forced them back. Crying had worked with my family, but it wouldn't work here. And finally, March 27th, just 2 days ago, Mr. Lefebvre wrote, "I've been thinking about our situation. I could help you start over here in Paris if you're serious about leaving." Your response, "I'm seriously considering it. Sophie would love Paris, and I could be happy there." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the rain against the conference room windows, the hum of the air conditioning, the sound of my own heart pounding. "Mrs. Finch," Morrison said gently, "is there anything you'd like to add to your earlier statement that you're not having an affair?" I looked at Adrian, really looked at him, for the first time since I'd entered the room. His eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion, and I could see the pain I'd caused written across his face. But there was something else there too, a finality that terrified me. "It wasn't a physical affair," I said quietly. "But it was an emotional affair," Morrison stated. Yes, I suppose it was." "And you were making plans to leave your husband and take your daughter to live with Mr. Lefebvre in Paris?" "I was just talking. I wasn't serious about—" "Mrs. Finch," Morrison interrupted, "do you love your husband?" The question should have been easy to answer, but I found myself hesitating. Did I love Adrian, or had I just gotten used to the life we'd built together? "I care about Adrian very much," I said finally. "That's not what I asked. Our marriage has had problems for a while. That doesn't mean I don't love him. But you love Mr. Lefebvre too." I have feelings for Mathieu, yes, but that doesn't mean I was going to leave my family." Morrison closed the folder. "Mrs. Finch, I want you to understand the legal reality of your situation. In the state of Illinois, emotional adultery is grounds for divorce. Your documented communications with Mr. Lefebvre, combined with your deceptive behavior regarding the Paris trip, constitute clear evidence of marital misconduct." "What does that mean?" "It means that if this case goes to court, you'll be found at fault for the breakdown of the marriage. That affects everything: property division, spousal support, and most importantly, custody of your daughter." The word custody hit me like a sledgehammer. "You can't take Sophie away from me." "No one wants to take Sophie away from you," Adrian spoke for the first time since I'd arrived. "But we need to establish what's best for her going forward. I'm her mother. You're also someone who is planning to move her to another country to live with your boyfriend," Morrison pointed out. "I wasn't actually going to do that. It was just fantasy, just escape planning. Everyone does that when they're unhappy." "Mrs. Finch," Morrison said, "I'm going to be very direct with you. Your husband is prepared to file for divorce on grounds of adultery. He's also prepared to seek primary custody of your daughter based on your demonstrated willingness to prioritize your relationship with Mr. Lefebvre over your family's stability." The room was spinning. This couldn't be happening. 3 weeks ago, I was a happily married mother with a successful career. How had everything fallen apart so completely? However, Morrison continued, Mr. Finch is also prepared to offer you a settlement that avoids a lengthy court battle. He slid a document across the table. This is a proposed divorce agreement. You would retain joint custody of Sophie, with primary residence remaining here in Chicago. You would receive your share of marital assets, minus the costs associated with your affair, the Paris trip, your phone bills for international communications, and legal fees. I stared at the papers without really seeing them. And if I don't sign? Then we go to court, and you risk losing much more than money. I looked at Adrian again, searching for any sign of the man I'd married, the father of my child, the person who'd once loved me enough to promise forever. Adrian, please. Can't we try counseling? Can't we work this out? For a moment, his expression softened, and I thought I saw a flicker of the old Adrian. Then it was gone. Eudora, you asked Mathieu if Sophie would like Paris. You discussed taking our daughter away from me to start a new life with another man. There's no counseling that fixes that. I was just talking. I was upset and confused and... You were planning, Adrian said firmly. And the only reason you didn't follow through is because you got caught. Morrison stood up. Mrs. Finch, you don't need to make a decision today. Take the weekend to review the settlement offer and consult with your own attorney if you wish. But I should mention that this offer expires Monday at 5 p.m. After that, we proceed to litigation. I gathered my purse with shaking hands. What do I tell Sophie? Tell her the truth, Adrian said. Tell her that sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they love, and sometimes those choices have consequences that can't be undone. As I walked out of that conference room and into the grey Chicago afternoon, I realized that everything I'd built over the past 8 years was gone. My marriage, my family, my reputation, all destroyed by a single photo and the web of lies I'd spun to protect it. But even then, even as I sat in my car crying in the parking garage, part of me still believed that I was the victim in all of this, that Adrian was overreacting, that somehow this was all his fault for not being the husband I needed. I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. Monday arrived with inevitability. Every lawyer told me the same thing. Except the settlement, the evidence was overwhelming. Browser searches about deleting messages, social media tracking, dashcam footage, and worst of all, reports from Sophie's school counselor showing my daughter already feared Paris would replace her father. At Morrison and Associates, both families were waiting. My lies were read aloud. Then a voicemail played, me begging Mathieu to delete messages and lie, terrified I'd lose Sophie. The room went silent. Faced with criminal implications and public exposure, Adrian signed first. I followed. 6 months later, I live alone, see Sophie on weekends, and finally understand this wasn't bad luck.